Hey, Inspired Girls, I'm Jessica, and I'm on the Inspired team here at X Church. And I know that Janice, Megan, and myself have missed you as we took a break to get ready for and have our second annual Inspired Conference. It was so much fun as we gathered on October 1st to learn when our glory days really are, and we discovered that in fact we are living in our glory days right now. We had amazing speakers, powerful breakouts, yummy food that supports a great cause, among many other things on that day, but we captured this special podcast for you, recorded live at the conference. Whether you were at the conference and want a second listen, or you weren't able to attend, we wanted to make this podcast available to you. If you were not able to attend this year, you may not have heard that we moved the Inspired Conference to the spring. Mark your calendars for May 6th, 2023, and join us for the next Inspired Conference. Registration is open on our website at thex.church/events. On this panel discussion, we had some guests, all of whom are good friends of mine, who are remarkably smarter and more insightful than me, talk about shame. This invaluable discussion will hopefully give you the tools to maybe pinpoint experiences or trains of thoughts that you have had to lead to personal shame. Our very own Pastor Zach hosts the discussion and does a great job at asking questions that really get to the bottom of what shame is. So get ready for a new episode of the Inspired Podcast.
Good morning, ladies. How are you guys doing this morning?
Good.
Doing good? Doing good? Awesome. Well, hey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves? So I'm going to start with you, Renee. Okay, Renee. Okay, I already revealed your name.
Ready.
But the question is, what is your name? Okay, tell me a little bit about your background, and then what are you doing right now?
Right now, I'm slipping on this couch. Is
Yeah,
what I'm doing.
a little bit, yeah.
So my name's Renee. Seriously,
Yeah.
it's kind of fun. And I am from Southeast Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
I live here in Columbus, Ohio, and I work for an organization called Ministry Architects. We work with churches all over the country, big, small, contemporary, traditional, and everything in between, just helping support sort of the sustainability of the local church into the future, and I love it. Here locally, I love the Buckeyes. I love Broadway. I love, that's right, 3:30 kickoff for a dumb game. I have a niece and a nephew that, just have my heart, and that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome.
Oh, do you want me to pass it off?
Yeah, you can pass it off to whoever.
Who are you?
Whoever wants.
Well, hello.
We've met. I'm Molly Fearing, and I'm from Texas. Yes, I am, from Arlington. And I currently do a lot of things. It's so interesting. I am a grandma. I'm a lolly, and I have 6 grandchildren, 5 of who are boys that are very busy, and 1 precious granddaughter. After having 2 sons, she is the granddaughter and the girl, besides the precious girls that God has given us in our family. But God has also given me some precious girls in my life, and 2 of them are sitting right there. And what God has called me to in this season of life is really mentoring, and I love to do that, and just listening, living, and walking with others toward Jesus. And that's the joy of my heart and what I love to do. And the other things I love to do is I love gardening, except that it was 112 in Texas for like 2 months. And so my plants are just kind of like this. They're alive but not blooming, but they're alive, most of them. And so I love to do that.
Well, it's still hot in Texas right now, right?
It's 90 degrees. It was 90 degrees when we left.
Man.
So, yes, I love painting. I know that is very random. I love planning. I like making things that are junk look incredible and redoing them. And I just started watercolor. So that's kind of a new thing that I love to do as well. So,
Not gonna lie, if it was 112 degrees, I would probably look like this too. It would not be good.
That's why July 4th is not always our favorite holiday, because it's so hot.
Yeah.
Which is
For
very
sure.
sad. But.
For sure.
You go.
Oh. Well, you guys know me. We're best friends now. I know how you eat your hash browns. So I'm married to Chad. We've been in ministry for 20 plus years, and I work for a publishing company in Nashville.
Very cool.
Where I do marketing, and I recently turned in a manuscript for my first book.
Ooh,
It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. Don't clap. And don't buy it.
She's talking about it last night. She's like, first and only. It will be the only book.
I love my doodle, and I quilt.
Okay.
So there.
There we
Okay,
go.
I have to jump.
I didn't know she quoted.
I have to jump back in because I didn't say this, and I love my husband dearly, and we've nearly been married 50 years.
Yeah,
Sorry.
congratulations.
I thought,
Yay!
why haven't I told them? And I do have one other thing. I did go last weekend to my 50th high school reunion, and that is a whole session on itself, but we won't go there.
Yes.
I just had to say something about Don.
Well, I'm Jessica, and I kind of do Inspired here.
Yeah, you do.
So this day come alive is like a dream come true to me.
Yeah.
And I think that really the most important thing is that gets me excited is that we can just sit in a room and we can learn more about who God is.
Yeah.
Because I know we're all on a journey. I'm on a journey discovering who He is. There's depths after depth after depth after depth of who He is that we have not discovered yet. And so I just love the process of learning who He is. But like she said, she gives a lot of her time to mentoring, and I am a recipient of that. Her living in Texas, we chat about once or twice a month, and
Sometimes once a week. depending on what's
lengthy discussions. And I'm better because of it. I mean, she's just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. And then, like I said earlier, she was my youth minister. Her and her husband were my youth
Scary
ministers. Scary. They called her Scary Ann
Yeah.
back then,
Yeah.
because you're just times 10.
Yeah.
So these two women are really important in my life. And then this girl.
I'm just around.
No, you're not. I met Renee when I moved to Ohio, and she just showed up and in my life and never left, which is great. So she's one of my dear friends as well. But
I love the power of the friendships that are displayed here on this platform. It's really cool to see just throughout the years, the friendships that you guys developed, the friendship that you two have developed, Renee and Jess, and it's cool to see that and for everyone to be able to witness that. Now, moving on, we were talking about glory days today, and I love that theme as you were kind of coming up with that and picturing what it looked like. It's this idea that, hey, sometimes we think our best days are behind us, but in reality, we actually have a whole lot to actually look forward to in our lives. But if we're being honest, and I think you hit on this a little bit, there's a few things that I think sometimes keep us maybe trapped in the past, maybe keep us locked in old patterns and behaviors. A couple of those being disappointment and shame. We actually have specific breakouts on those later on, but I want to drill down on one of those things, and that's shame, because I think it's one of those things that creeps up in our stories, like time and time again. Shame just always comes up, and it really can keep us locked in our past. So I'm going to start with you, Molly, all right, but I want to hear from all of you. Molly, in your mind, what is like a working definition of shame?
First of all, I want to say that we all have it, so let's just start there. It is present in our life, whether we acknowledge it or not, and I think that's an important beginning to say. And it is either, for me, it's either an experience you've had or a feeling that you've had. And for me, it's a both and, that you are unworthy, that you're unlovable, that you're alone, you're not enough, and that you won't ever be. You're basically flawed. And for me, I think even that distinction is that you are sin. I mean, there's such twistedness just here that there's unhealthy twistedness in that. But I think that in my head, even at times, that twisted I thought about Mary Ann's boxes, and I thought shame is that you still leave the shame. You still leave the sin box in there rather than taking it out and putting Christ in. You believe that that's still there. And therefore you're not enough, and you're unworthy of being loved and connection. And terrible lie that's there is that that's what you were made for, is to be loved and connected. And so shame just pulls that away. What you were made for is for that. And that's what shame does.
Molly said something interesting, and I'd be curious what you girls think. You said the sin box should stay in because that sometimes shame...
that's who you are.
Right, because shame stays in.
Yeah.
But is shame sin? Boom. I mean, like, I can't help it if I feel shame, or if an experience has happened that evokes a shameful reaction. Now, I'm going to control my reactions.
But it's back to that perception.
Sure.
That's who I am.
But I think sin so often is linked to clear
It's a
behavior.
deception.
And
Yes.
so distinguishing that shame exists in us without necessarily a action connection.
Absolutely, but
is
that's
important.
where the deceiver were. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the deception of it. I think that's what's in our head, but that's not what's reality. Don't you think?
Sure.
I mean, we
can
call
think
that, yeah.
Yeah, well, I can think, yeah, but that's an interesting
But it's not
dynamic. We
sin.
can't always control the shame that exists in us.
No, or that it comes at us.
Because that just creates more shame. Like, oh, I didn't deal with my shame. I should have dealt with my shame. Like,
Or
that's
I took on my shame, it's back to unworthiness. I mean, that just
Yes.
builds on top of I'm not enough, I'm unworthy, all those things.
I think we have to remember that Scripture clearly states, there is therefore now no condemnation. Shame will always condemn us. Always.
Absolutely.
It will always condemn us. I see shame like Mod Podge. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know when you do a craft and you Mod Podge, and it's this glossy thing that kind of tries to stick to some sort of a craft project? And that's what shame tries to do. It tries to hold us captive. But Jesus dismantled all of that because he said, there's therefore now no condemnation. You aren't your sin, you aren't your shame. But I think you're right in that I think we have to do the work in our mind. It's a right thinking thing. Just because we feel shame we got to be careful that we never build our walk with Jesus on how we feel, ladies. Because holy cow, Titanic, like, we feel all over the place. They're not trustworthy. And so that's why we've got to know truth, so that when shame confronts us, when the voice of the thief confronts us, we know truth to dismantle it.
But do you remember when you didn't even recognize that what you felt was shame?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that in the past, I've had trouble identifying actually what shame is, because I feel a certain way, and it's almost like a feeling of regret, or like my expectations are let down. And for a long time, I didn't know that some of that stemmed from shame, because it was the feeling inadequate, it was the I'm not good enough, or I failed, or, and a lot of this, I think shame, for me personally, is rooted in my past. And it rears its ugly head in the most unexpected times, I feel like. And sometimes it just comes out of nowhere, and I feel like I'm not good enough. But I think where the work comes in with shame is digging. And I think that you have walked through with me a lot of the digging. Like, well, why do you feel that way? And then I can say something like, well, because, I can tell you a story from my childhood. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And you've helped me connect the dots between like experiences that I've had in my childhood where that was my armor that I put up as a kid because I had to survive.
Actually,
We've all done that.
Yes.
There's certain situations in our childhood where, we can have a perfectly good childhood, but we still have certain kinds of armor that we put up, and we keep that armor on. And I feel like my whole adult life has been dismantling the armor piece by piece because I put it up, and I wall off and I block off Christ from doing any work inside of me.
Yeah, I think I was going to ask, on that note, I think you bring up a good point, Jess. You say that it took a lot of digging to maybe uncover the source of your shame and really doing work with a mentor, someone to help pull that out. And I think you might even be going where I was going to ask you this, Renee. So if we know what shame is, we're beginning to have a working definition of it. I do think it's hard sometimes to identify that shame. And it is hard to do the work to dig it out. And so my question is to you, like, what are some of the obstacles in your mind, and I want to hear from all of you too, that kind of keep us from correctly identifying or even realizing that it's shame that we're carrying? Because sometimes I think it's easy for us to play off, oh, well, I'm just a basket case, or I just feel a certain way, when in reality, it's actually shame that we're carrying. So what are some of those things?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, I want to separate shame from guilt. Brene Brown does this if you've read any of her work. Shame is an identity. It's a voice inside of you. It's a belief about yourself versus the guilt of an action or a reaction to that. And that's important to note, because what I think the major obstacle is time, practically. How many of you just have spare time laying around to analyze whether your actions or reactions are based in shame? Yeah, that's a Saturday morning for me, right? Like, all right, Lord, what did I do this week that was rooted in shame, not pride or anger? So cool. So I think time, practically, is really difficult to come by, to truly take the time for the next obstacle, which is the humility and the ability for self-reflection and awareness.
Absolutely.
But I will say that along with the time, I think that in uncovering shame in our life, it might take a lot of investment up front, but I feel like the investment is well worth it, because then we can more quickly identify where are these thoughts and actions coming from. And the more practice we get in capturing those and speaking truth to those shame, that shame, the quicker we become in being able to say, I spiraled because that was my armor for that, and I picked that up a long time ago, and so we can dismantle it quickly.
Yes.
More quickly.
Yes.
Don't you think too, though, that as you become aware, that's where what shame wants to do is to isolate you and keep it a secret.
Yeah.
That's what feeds it. That's the fuel. So if you name it, if you go, oh, that's what that is, and yes, it's here, and then you invite others into that. So for me, I had a really good friend when I first started really seeing it, and I would call and say, I think this is shame. Is this shame? And she'd go, yep, that's shame. I mean, and as I began to see with others, because that was part of my being. Yeah. So it was taking apart part of who I was. It wasn't working well for me, but it was who I was. And so to begin to see that and then have others help who love you, lovingly can say, yes, that's it.
Well, that's what I was going to say is the third obstacle. It's a fear, because if I have the time to address it and I'm humble enough and have the ability to be self-aware enough, then the fear of what do I let go if I don't believe that about myself anymore? Right. Like if I don't have a reason for my anger or my withdrawal or like all these actions that are rooted in my shame, then who am I and what do I become? Now, we can easily, like, Sunday school answer this, like, Jesus.
Right.
Look, we become like Jesus. But it's just not that linear.
No.
Because it's really messy.
So I gave an example this morning. I'm very transparent here. When I paused about what I do, I have worked all my life. I've had lots of roles, all those. It is still hard for me to say I don't work, because I found so much of my self-value in that. Yeah. And there was shame. When she started talking about what she did, my first thought is, well, what are you going to say about who you are? God's like, that's not who you are. That's not who you are.
That's right.
But that's still there. And I've been working on this for 30 years. I'm not being discouraging. I'm saying.
Let me springboard off Molly. So she had shame there, and I'm an Enneagram 1, so my self-critic is just like really loud right now. And I'm like, why did I start with what I did for a living? But then there's this, I don't know, you tell me. I don't have biological children of my own. I don't think I have shame in that, but I felt the need to say I have a niece and nephew to almost validate the voice I might give to whomever might also have children in their life. Yeah. I don't think that's rooted in shame, but just sitting on this couch, I'm like, well, crap.
It's hard. It really is hard.
It's a little thread that's just in there, and
that's
it's woven in, and then God loves me so much. So much he loves me. He doesn't want that there.
Yeah.
And so he uses this. He uses every moment. And I think that's the next thing, is that naming it, asking and inviting others in that you trust. Don't invite people. If they've shown you who they are, as Maya says, believe them. Don't invite them into this. And invite those that love you unconditionally and trust to be a part of it. But I think then start seeing what are the triggers for it. I mean, those are important. Like what does that? I know how many times I said to those two, so what triggered that? You know, what had that to pop up? And I think that's another part. And acknowledging that it's there and not feeling shameful, but that God loves you so much, he wants to pull that thread all the way out.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
for it to be removed.
I was just thinking, I think shame for me presents with people pleasing. It does.
I think, well, that's a good point. And I think you bring up a lot of ways that shame exists. It can be people pleasing. You were even joking like, hey, in this moment, like maybe this is a response rooted in shame. And if you're not careful, it can creep up in every area of our lives.
Yeah.
Parenting, relationships, past experiences. I mean, it could be all of those things. We never know what our shame could be tied to. And I love this question because I feel like you're so good, Jess, at giving a first practical next step. You're always thinking, hey, what's a good next step? And so I'd love to hear from all of you too. So we know what shame is, and we've identified it in our lives. What's just a good first step? Like, it's going to take a while to pull that thread all the way out of someone's life. It's not just, hey, we're going to snap our fingers. Hey, chain's gone, shame is gone. Woo, we're done. But what's a good first step to take when it comes to overcoming our shame?
I think that that's a really hard question, but I feel like shame and identity are so closely knit. It's like splitting hairs, shame and identity, because what I've learned about myself and as I've worked through shame, that I'm like pulling myself apart, because it's like I'm dissecting. It's like I'm on an operation table and I'm being dissected because it's so much in me. And because it causes me to react, it controls the way I respond in situations. And so I think shame is just so closely interwoven into our identity. And so what I've had to do is, like I said, like if I can identify it quickly, if I've done the work to identify what it is in my life and why it's there, and how it creeps in, then my first response often is I have to tell myself, there's nothing I can do to mess up God's plans for me or anybody around me. Yeah. And I have to tell myself that because I'm a control freak and I want everything to be, we all are, but it's because we're selfish. We're selfish human beings and we want things to go our way. We have expectations of the way it should go. And I have to be careful because I need to surrender all of my situations. I need to surrender my day. I need to surrender my circumstances. I need to surrender my relationships of people, because if I'm not careful, I start controlling and getting in the weeds, and then I feel this shame creep up. Yeah. And it's like, you're not good enough for that person. Or obviously you weren't good enough for that person because they're leaving you now and like they don't want to be your friend. Or you said something that really offended someone, so they're not your friend anymore. And I take it personally, but I have to realize that as I'm working out my shame, my first thought has to be, there's nothing I can do to mess God's plan up, because I feel like I can, but I can't. I have to remind myself of that. He's way bigger than all of my shame and my stuff. And I have to remember there's actually nothing I can do. There's nothing I can think about myself that is going to thwart his plans for my life.
Yeah. I was really hoping you'd say thwart. I was. And I think with shame, we use a lot of lacking language, like I'm not fill in the blank. But I don't know how many of y'all ever feel like you're too much, and that shame can be attached to being too much.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And how many of y'all have been told, and I'll raise my hand, that you are too much?
Yes.
Hey, you're bringing it just a little, right?
They're too much.
That's just a little much for what we're trying to do here, Renee. Okay. You know, that's hard.
See, identity, because when someone tells you you're too much, it's like, well, but that's who I am.
Right.
And so it's so hard to split the hairs of like, okay, we'll do it. And that people pleasing, it's like, well, then maybe I need to be a different person for you. And that causes us to go everywhere because then we're like, or a different person to this person, because we're basing our personality and our identity based on what you want of me.
Right.
Oh yeah, one of the most stressful situations I've ever been in, I decided to have a big birthday party for myself when I turned 28. And I had a big cookout.
28, what a monumental birthday.
It was a good year. Well, yes, I was very excited for being 20, I don't know. And so it was big. So I invited all my people groups. And y'all know what that means, right? Like folks that I worked with and folks that I went to church with and folks that I, like just all the people groups.
That's a stress ball waiting to happen.
I didn't know. And then when they all left and it was just my sister and I, because she was spending the night, I said, I need to take a shower. We were having a cookout, I was sweaty, I was gross. So I jump in the shower and I bawled and I did not know that was gonna happen. And it's for exactly the reason you said. I didn't realize how much I merge or transform or just adjust ever so slightly. But because they were all there and were converging, I was exhausted.
Yeah.
You're like a chameleon that didn't know what color you wanted to be.
And then I didn't know I did that though. I didn't know I did that. I just thought, man, I get along with this group and this group and it'll be so great, they'll all be together. It is not great. It's not great.
So real quick, we're running short of time, and I want to get to some of your questions. Y'all have sent in some great questions. If you want to send one in, just text INSPIRED to 94,000. But real quick, Marianne, I want to hear from you. In a lot of these conversations, I think it's possible that deep down inside, there might be someone here who's just sitting here that says, hey, it's great. I would love to be able to step out of my shame. But if I'm being honest, there's almost too much. It's too deeply ingrained inside of me that it's hard to have hope for the future. What would you say to that person today?
God loves you for free.
It's good.
And he's the only one who loves you for free.
That's good. That's really good.
And can I just say on a side note, I've been in therapy for 2 decades. Molly and I go to the same therapist. And when you're diving into the deep, and he says great wisdom to me, you would never drive without your glasses. So why do we try to emotionally pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and try to wander through life without our glasses on? Mm-hmm. Go talk to somebody with biblical wisdom who's licensed. When you're in that dark place, go get some glasses to see clearly. It's remarkable.
We were just talking about this morning. Your youngest son wears glasses and my oldest does, and we were talking about how before they had glasses.
Total mom fail. We didn't know our kids need glasses.
Yes. Until Jude slipped the glasses on and goes, I didn't know I could see this well.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That's how shame is, because we know no better.
That's
because
right.
we've never done the work to dig or to see clearly.
That's
and
right.
so when you start to see clearly, it's like a whole new world.
You don't realize you're seeing something that you haven't seen.
It's really good. Okay, a couple quick questions I want to get to close off. I think this question is one that really hits home. And so I'd like to hear from all of you quickly, though, so we can go on. This question comes in, someone asks, how can women combat the shame that other women project onto each other?
Ooh, let me do this one, ready?
Molly, tell us.
No, you go.
Don't should all over everybody. SHOULD. Well, you shoulda. Don't should all over me.
I think she cut.
And don't should all over yourself.
You did too. You're in the house of the Lord, Renee.
I said SHOULD. Don't do it.
I will say also that for way too many years, I had a real twisted thing. And I just felt like if people came into my life, then that was an opportunity. I was supposed to be something for them and listen and all this. And there were no sense of levels of relationship. There were, but there weren't. They were very, very fuzzy. And I was in ministry. And so, if I met them, it was my job to minister and change their life. There's lots of distorted unhealthiness, but God's redeemed that. But I would say in that is knowing who you can allow truth being spoken to you and to trust for that truth. And outside of that, just walk away.
She always told me.
Walk away.
She always told me, they don't define you.
Right.
And I needed her voice, the
Right.
Lord through her. But I would just be spinning out with this very question. Whoever wrote this question, thank you, because that is what every one of us is dealing with, is expectations from other women and all the things. We know how to give the stank eye like nobody's business. And we sure don't like our kids doing it back to us, but hey, we taught them. So she would say when I was spinning out, they don't define you.
And I would say first, that is a lie.
Yeah.
And why are you letting them speak that into you?
Exactly.
Why are you absorbing that? It is a lie. You gotta have those people.
Yes.
Or I have those people, and I now am calling them and saying, okay, I know this is a lie, but I need you to tell me this lie.
Yeah.
I need you to tell me some truth, because I know that, back to feeling, I know it's the truth, but my feelings are in a whole different place. So speak that truth into me and walk with me to move into where those things line up better. And I think that's women are mean. Mean.
We are.
It breaks my heart. I think we're mean because, well, that's a whole nother, we don't have time.
Well, and what we do
Well,
in the
we'll
darkness,
get-
I think
There's so much potential there that the mean cuts it off. And so,
I think preaching is really good at saying what you do in the darkness, bring to the light, and then there'll be accountability. But what we think in the darkness also needs to be brought in the light.
Absolutely.
So I will
That's right.
sometimes ask a friend like, hey,
Yes.
I just need to say this out loud, and can you work it through with me? Jess has been on the receiving end of that a lot.
Yes.
I just need to say this out loud, and we got to figure out what's truth and what's not, because it feels true. I mean, it feels real true.
Can
One
I
of
say-
the most profound scriptures recently in James says, confess your sins one to another, and we always dismiss this part, comma, so that you may be healed.
Exactly.
That is why that's there. That's why God put that into a place.
But you don't
comma, so
confess
that
to
you may be
everybody. You confess to that. Can I just say one?
Yeah.
Developmentally, I just want to say for you, because I think we have a wide span of age, and lifespan development is kind of my deal. So something happens, just like you have toddlerhood, you have adolescence where everything's kind of disassembled, and that lasts for 10 years really kind of. Something begins to happen in women around 35, somewhere between 35 and 45, and where I think things start kind of just churning up in questions, and there's a little bit of a disassembling of things, and that's when I see in a lifespan of a lot of these things beginning to come up and those questions being asked. And I think you spend the rest of your lifehood looking at your story prior to that, or I have, and it helps often to understand this part. And so it can shine a light on the other part. When you look at your story all the way through with God, and you ask Him to show you, and you lean into Him, and as He shows you that and interprets, you'll see where you were named. I have a shame of my mother, who is literally Mary Ann's size, was Mary Ann's tiny. My dad, who was 6'5" and good side, and they were farmers. And my aunt was a farmer, a good-sized farmer. And my mother would always say, honey, you're just like your aunt. Well, what she meant was I was kind and generous, but I was named that. And so in my mind, I was always the farm girl. Do you hear that? That was an aha for me in looking at my story. Because as children, things you're named, and you carry those with you. And those are some of the things, and you develop things that you do in order to survive. And that's the work that God does in our sanctification, in our adult life, which really doesn't begin till 35 or 40, if truth be.
That's really good. There's so many more questions I would love to be able to get to, but we just don't have time today. I will say, there's some inquiring minds who want to know what happened to Jack and Rose.
To who?
Jack and Rose, your friends, Jack and Rose.
Okay, yes, Jack and Rose. They broke up. She is single and is in social work.
There you go. That's the end of the story.
And she does
right there.
walk.
Her back is fine. She recovered. They broke up. That's the interesting part of the story.
Yeah.
And she is a strong woman.
There you go.
Awesome. Strong woman.
Cool. Well, I know there's so many of you who would like to ask more questions. I know I won't speak for these four, but y'all are going to be hanging out
Yes.
during lunch, breakouts. If they did not get to your question, or if you have something that you want to maybe ask one of them one-on-one, feel free to go up to them during lunch. They would love to be able to answer your question. Did y'all find this helpful this morning? Come on, can we give them a round of applause? So good.